Alright, so today we're going to talk about types of bonding. There are three types of bonding: ionic, covalent, and metallic. So first we're going to talk about ionic. Ionic bonding is the electrostatic force between a cation, which is a positively charged metal ion, and an anion, which is a negatively charged nonmetal ion. And this is created by the transfer of electrons. So the metal transfers its electrons to the nonmetal. Ionic compounds form from ions, and the ions are created when the metal loses the electrons and the nonmetal gains them. Ionic substances form giant ionic lattices which contain positively and negatively charged ions, and you can see a picture of that here. They have high melting and boiling points because the intermolecular forces are strong. They can conduct electricity when they're melted or dissolved in water because these negative charges are free to move when they're dissolved or melted. But when they're solid, they don't conduct electricity because these negative charges are not free to move because they are attracted by the positive ions. Some examples are sodium chloride and calcium oxide. Covalent bonding are bonds that form between nonmetals. The nonmetals are connected by the sharing of valence electrons. Covalent bonds are intramolecular forces, that is, that they're inside the molecule and hold the atoms together to make the molecule. Covalent bonds are strong bonds, and it is difficult to break them and requires a lot of energy to break them apart into their atoms. However, since the molecules are neutral, one molecule does not have a strong electrical attraction for another. The attractions between the molecules are called intermolecular forces, and they are weak forces. Covalent substances have low melting points because their intermolecular forces are weaker than ionic and metallic compounds. At room temperature, covalent substances can be solids, liquids, or gas, and they do not conduct electricity as solids or when they're molten, that means when they're melted into liquid, and usually do not conduct when they're dissolved in water. Some examples are carbon dioxide and ammonia. There are also examples of some nonmetals that never exist as single atoms. They exist as diatomic elements. What that means is that they're covalently bonded to another atom of itself. And these elements are nitrogen, oxygen, fluorine, chlorine, bromine, and hydrogen. If you look at them on the periodic table, they actually make a 7, with hydrogen, of course, sort of an apostrophe, if you will. But you have your nitrogen, oxygen, fluorine, chlorine, bromine, your nitrogen, oxygen, fluorine, chlorine, bromine, iodine on the periodic table. So that's a good way to learn them. Finally, we're going to talk about metallic bonding. And metallic bonding are bonds between multiple metal atoms. The metallic bond is formed by the mutual attraction of each other's loosely held valence electrons. The metal cations are said to be surrounded by a sea of electrons. Metallic bonding is found in elemental metals and in mixtures of metals, which are called alloys. Some examples of those are copper, steel, brass, silver, and gold. And you can see the picture here shows you those positive cations surrounded by the negative electrons. The electrical attractions of cations for the electrons are strong and hard to break. So metals are high melting point crystalline solids. And so because the electrons are free to move, the metals also are good conductors of electricity and heat as solids and as liquids. They are bendable, which means that they are malleable, and they can be drawn out into a wire, which means they are ductile. This loose cloud of electrons is good at absorbing and re-emitting the light energy that strikes it, which means that metals are lustrous or shiny. They have luster or are shiny. And these are the different properties of the three different types of compounds formed from different types of bonding.